defining what we thought barriers were. So these were mainly economic barriers, you know, the profits that could be made from the crops, the fact that they're not food crops and whether that's a kind of cultural barrier around food versus fuel. Do people prefer to grow food, not plant trees, or see it as such? A barrier that there's just big competition for land use. So, you know, tree planting, rewilding, food, nature conservation, etc., etc. And, you know, different people have different priorities, organisations have different priorities. There's a challenge around land tenure and ownership. So farms often tenanted, but these are long-term investments, long-term crops. And so can tenant farmers plant these crops that should be in the ground 15, 20 years? Is there a limitation, and why would they? If it's kind of short-term tenancy, they're more likely to be making short-term decisions. A lack of, just a general lack of knowledge and awareness. I think people felt that, you know, lots of people just don't know what biomass crops are, never mind what the pros and cons are, but just that they exist or how they could be used. I know that lots of people don't know that Drax is burning large amounts of biomass and importing from the States. There's limitations around professional support and advice. It's kind of a really small sector. Just because it's a small sector, there's not many people advising. It maybe is not that independent, and that's one of the reasons that Biomass Connect was created. And along with that, because it's a small sector, there's not much capacity for producing planting materials for a large scale up, or, you know, there's not much equipment for contracted, you know, planting and harvesting, and that limits scale up. Economics is seen as a big barrier, and, you know, that for some of these crops there's maybe a harvest every 3 years or even longer with SRF, and that's a big shift in cash flow and mindset really for farmers who are used to an annual return, especially arable farmers. But also just the fact of this large upfront investment and then kind of payback over a long time period after that. And yeah, the cultural shift we decided was probably not only in the minds of growers but also in the minds of DEFRA. You know, that actually DEFRA is, you know, more about food production. It's always had a role in nature conservation, but actually non-food growing is kind of a shift and not looked on favourably by some parts of DEFRA. In terms of how to overcome some of these barriers, kind of smaller scale action, there's a market, they'll see that there's different places they can sell to and different products, and suggesting that we needed a champion of some kind, probably in the farming industry, somebody vocal and high profile who could really talk about these crops, and maybe we need to discuss that among the consortium, because I don't know who that could be in the UK. And finally, a suggestion that we should maybe be targeting kind of more on the educational side, so schools and colleges, as, you know, just in this general raising knowledge and awareness, normalising the crops in British society, really, just to inform and educate. That was that.